I'm gonna let them finish up snacking while we do our call to order. So we will call this Tuesday, June 4th meeting of the Regional Plan Committee to order at 6:02 p.m. and take roll call.
Holly Applin is excused. Paul Byer.
Here.
Tina Berger. Here. Alicia Chi, are you online? Abe Estrella.
Here.
Eric Foreman. Anthony Garcia.
Present.
Here. Robert Hamilton.
Here.
David Hayward.
Here.
Michelle James. Here. Julie Lead. Here. Frank Miller.
Here.
Tom Pearson.
Here.
Walter Phelps, are you online? Tim Robinson. John Van Landingham.
Here.
Diane Bosick. Here. Al White is excused and Christy Zeller is excused.
Anyone like to read the an acknowledgement?
Read it. The city of Flagstaff humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands, various indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands still inhabited by native descendants, holy mountains sacred to the indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contribution. Celebrate their past, present, future generations who will forever place his home.
That's off.
Sure. So a couple meetings ago, Paul Byer asked us if we could have a discussion of the title and kind of what other plans might look like. And so Joe O'Connell, who is our comprehensive planning intern, did some research and prepared a spreadsheet to give you all access to kind of who's been winning, what do they look like, the award-winning plans in Arizona? What are some that support climate change goals, which I think is another kind of approach that sustainability helped us do some research on, and to just give you an idea of how they're organized, what their titles are. You know, we've kind of got an approach, and it just will be a good reference for you to have too, as we're going to do a whole document in August to kind of start thinking your background, what other things might look like. There's the answer to just the question overall of like, is there one way to put a plan together in Arizona is absolutely not. Everybody's plan is organized differently. Everybody's plan has a different look based on what they're trying to emphasize or promote. And we do now have a writer-editor team from Avenue Consulting, which prepared a lot of these larger writing documents for state and local jurisdictions in the state and does a very good job. And they are starting to work on thinking about the design based on the content we have, and also they may make some recommendations for organization as we're pulling things together. But overall, this is just kind of an overview, and I can pull any up you want to look at, or we can talk about them. I think one of the key things was it's Flagstaff Regional Plan 2045, what we want to call this plan. I will say that we're open to other things. Lots of places do, like, you know, Imagine Austin or Power Detroit. And so there's more catchy ways to define it. There's a lot of approaches. I don't have strong way on any of them. Like, I don't feel over that if there's a better, more meaningful way to approach that part of it, as long as we get the right information across. So we don't have a long discussion on this. We can just pocket it if nobody's ready to talk about it, but I'm going to get you the information and hear what you guys were thinking. Wanted to share. Good timing for us.
Forgot I had raised that issue.
Gosh, Paul, I don't think I take notes in these meetings.
Having received the, whatever, 157 pages or 290 pages, about, opened it up about 2 hours ago. I can't say I've read them.
Well, I think I told you guys last time not to read them.
Yes,
Get the visual.
but I did, at the beginning of the Scottsdale one, I thought they had some very nice pictures and some little bubbles of people saying things that kind of gave you the idea of vision and the way the community values. Just that public context, so do something like that.
I'm just taking notes.
I just started sharing. Oh no, it's coming.
It's just blinking.
So it's a nice example. It's a pretty picture, a little bunch of little quotes. Here's what we want to do.
Thinking maybe of getting more people excited about reading it, kind of making it more palatable
Yeah.
and inviting.
Make it feel like a vision rather than just,
Storybooks, bit of a code.
Yeah.
And what do people think about names? Like, what kind of work do you think when you think of regional plan or when you think of the future of Flagstaff? Or maybe
Your
even
Flagstaff. I mean, start throwing things out there, just put it in, see what happens.
so you think future.
No Friends of Flagstaff's future has any trademarks.
That order, that order.
Might just suggest and enable, I think we had a conversation about this, that I feel like through a lot of these meetings, it's like, we can't talk about this, it's not land use, we can't bring that up, it's not land use, or your public comment is heard, but we can't include it because it's not land use, I guess. So I would encourage us not to come up with flowery words that make it feel like vision or anything you want it to be. Regional plan, we talked about, should we call it the regional land use plan? I would just make sure the title is reflective of what it is and doesn't seem all encompassing when it turns out it's more specific.
Second that.
Yeah, I agree.
Regional and land use plan would be a really
Yes.
nice one.
Boring. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know, but like,
Technical document for technical purposes.
I'm totally joking. I like regional plan. I like something that's consistent that we've always called it. Cause I want to be inviting to everyone to read it too. I mean, I remember trying to help out build the 2011 one and then trying to read it afterwards. And it was hard for me to understand, but it's gonna be the same regardless. We're not gonna be able to change the wording of it very much. And this is technical. What do you think about that?
the name of the document in 2001 was the first time we called it a regional plan, and that was the regional and land use plan. And every iteration of it before was just called general plan, general plan, general plan. We haven't we haven't reinvented the wheel very much, I have to say, just over time. But it is interesting, like definitely some people had like branding people involved in naming it, and some people, just like said, it's our general plan, and we're very, clear but technical. So it can be whatever we think. So I hear like thinking about getting land use, like calling it the regional land use plan or regional and land use plan, rather than something.
Roots, I like that. Abel?
It's only, the reason for the suggestion was because sometimes we're not track even here. But when you go out in the field and you go, here's our land use plan. I'm sorry, here's our regional plan, which is like a real broad thing about our future. It wasn't. Land use. And how did it relate these things that they just talked about and wanted for the future when it specifically was about land use? So that's why let's just put it in the title and not worry about it.
Any other questions? Should we move on?
And anybody who has other feedback on it, like, "Ooh, I really like this imagery or picture or organization," you can just email me. This is a conversation we'll be having with the consultant over the next few weeks. So there's plenty of time to give other thoughts. But yeah, then we can move on to transportation.
And then, so then Sarah, if we move on to the review of the transportation chapter, do you want to take us through A and B? Of statutory requirements and the questions and clarification on that information?
So, there are actually quite a few requirements of the state statute on the transportation chapter. And you may have seen that some of them have been the legislative change potential category over the last few years. So we are just working off of what is currently required in the state statute, with an acknowledgement that if the state chooses to change what's required in one way or another, we'll have to make adjustments to that. Gonna pull up the map. So it does require that we have proposed bicycle facilities, the general location and extent of arterials and collectors, other modes of transportation, a transit section. It says we should have recommendations concerning parking facilities, and street naming and building numbering, which we do have addressing policies at the city and county. We tried to keep that pretty brief, but a couple of people commented, why is there this little addressing call out box? It seems like a non sequitur, but it's a required list. It does not require a discussion of freight or airport necessarily, but that traditionally is a topic we've included in the transportation chapter. And we wanted to keep doing that because we think those are critical parts of the transportation system. And unlike a lot of other cities, we actually run our own airport as a city. And we have land use issues around the airport that are specific to both being the land regulation agency and the owner manager. That's just another interesting way that we're kind of deviating. Those are kind of what the attorney said, like, they're not the minimum requirements, but they are in this chapter. And that's basically like the gist of what is required. But there is a lot to say about the future of transportation in the 21st century. There is a lot of moving parts. It is an area of uncertainty in a lot of ways because of how technology is changing how we use transportation and what transportation looks like. I think we can all just think about how our cars are different in the last 20 years, how we use our phones for mapping. Many of these tools are changing a lot of things. Rideshare is changing things, and we can imagine there'll be change in the future. So the approach to this chapter was largely to make sure we hit those requirements. We try and tell it as a story that draws that big picture. We also acknowledge that we have a blueprint. We have a regional transportation plan that's provided by Metro Plan that's in some detail. We have an active transportation master plan with the city that is another very deeper dive level of detail than the regional plan. And the city has now gotten a grant from the federal government to do a streets master plan, which will take the active transportation master plan, the blueprint 2040, and this regional plan, and combine them into an even more detailed transportation plan. And when we did the regional plan 10 years ago, we only had one of those things.
So question and clarification. Why do we have this at all then, in addition to like those three other things that you mentioned?
This is, all of those other three things conform with this document. So this should be that higher level and very clear. Like I said, I would take the arterial and collectors map out probably if you ask me what should be in there, but it's an explicit state requirement. So there's a little bit of like finessing this. It should be giving that big direction. We don't have a streets master plan yet. And what we write in this document could influence what is adopted in that plan. So Steph, I know from engineering, and I think Jeff and Martin are here. I don't think we have anyone from County Public Works yet. But would you like to speak to county transportation issues really quick?
Sure, it's a little bit simpler. I know Julie knows about this too, but the county does not have a transportation master capital That's how projects are prioritized. So the application chapter from this plan, but also, more importantly, the comprehensive helps to guide what works on the county side or. So yeah, it's a little bit different. I know that the county recently was awarded some grants. Public Works has some new grant announcements. I don't know exactly what those are. There are some, I think, really good projects coming up soon in terms of some new grants, and they're also applying for some other grants that hopefully will be, we can't announce those yet, but hopefully if we get awarded, good projects come on, more countywide than region-wide though, so.
Does anyone else have any other questions or points of they'd like clarification from?
Answer any upfront before we dive in.
And just to clarify too, the county is also required to have a transportation element in the comprehensive plan. So there is that nexus. It's not quite as detailed, but it includes a lot of the same requirements per statute. So, yeah, state guides us in a lot of ways. And then for the county's area plans, they will also talk on a sub-level about transportation in like Dundee Park and Kachina Village and Belmont. So there are different specific chapters in those area plans that are community specific.
I think it's important to note, like one of the balance, this may seem like a very city heavy chapter. That's because the transportation systems inside the city are just much more layered and complex. But the comprehensive plan will cover all of those things of detail for the county at that scale. And so we tried to make sure everything was covered fully, but like, for instance, there's a whole section on streetscapes and curb management, and none of that is really applicable in the county. They don't have something like Park Flag and the Euro project, which is where the city allows people to put parklets and parking spaces and street areas for other things, and like more commercial uses. Those are things that just don't exist in the county context because they're not contextually appropriate. So there is a good bit of sorting in here for that purpose too. Maybe the last thing to say is, if you'll remember in our current plan, have a we currently have a chapter on community character, which we decided as a standalone section created a lot of conflicts within the plan. And so we took the pieces out of community character that we wanted to carry forward, and we're embedding them in the other chapters. We've been doing that cultural resources now and resource stewardship and resilience. So this chapter brought forward great streets and gateways, which are really more about the streetscape and like environment of the street and the visual balance of the street than they are about the systems of transportation working on the street. So that's another thing. If there was consensus, we didn't want to retain that idea or that we wanted to change it significantly, this would be to talk about that. It's an idea that we carried forward with some changes to make sure we never meant to like abandon the community character conversation. We just didn't think it all belonged together anymore.
Those that you had in there regarding infrastructure for nice. But I had a question. So I saw that climate resilience or climate change focus stuff was part of the plan in a lot of ways. And was that a legal requirement, or were you just trying to keep in compliance kind of with the carbon neutrality plan?
That was cross-referencing the carbon neutrality plan with the content in this chapter at the state requirement.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
That's one of those things that might be in flux. The state, Jenny can speak to that. I think Jenny Neiman might be on the call, but the state there have been occasionally bills introduced that say like you can't use VMT or mention it in your general plan. None of those have passed so far, but that's the kind of thing that's been on the legislative docket for the last few years that we've been keeping an eye on. For now, that's not the case for what we're doing. So we've based it on where we fit current legal statutes.
That's where the basis of my question came from. I remember some talks about that. Thank you.
Got any other questions for Sarah before we dive in?
Or other staff, I should say. I'll tell you who's on the line, who you can phone a friend with or phone a staff person with. So Brian Gall, our airport director, is available. And so is Jeff Bauman, our transportation engineer. Jenny Neiman from sustainability, Martin Ince, who's our multimodal planner, and Steph Santana from transportation engineering, who's done a lot of the mapping work with us and does a lot of the helping with the engineering standards. On the Zoom, on the Teams call, and you can call on them if you.
Who's our extra person of the day?
Oh, Estella is here. Sorry. Estella, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hollander, I'm the planning manager with Mount Line. So if there are transit questions, happy.
Oh, yeah, Kim's right.
Hi. I'm Kim Austin. I'm from MetroPlan. I'm the TDM planner for
You tell everybody what TDM is.
management. I'm encouraging active transportation. And I did the Cheshire Project. Yeah, and there we go.
Ready, so we'll jump in. Conversation. I'd like to start the conversation by, I think, thanking everyone who is still here. I think it's kind of clear that we've, you know, we're down to the group of folks who's willing to stay here for the long haul. So, you know, I just, you know, having felt myself like I was, you know, struggling to gain the energy to come out this evening for another 3 hours, I felt like it would be nice for me to just make sure you all know that you're appreciated, and there's a lot of volunteer hours put into this process. Thank you all for sticking with it.
On that note, I just wanted to say that I see each one of you walking in with a little bit more of a pep in your step, understanding what we're doing here, and kind of feel good to see a group coming together.
Hopefully Anthony has all the energy that I lack.
If it's too low, we're gonna do yoga, okay?
Yeah. So, you know, and I would say that, you know, the flip side of that coin, and it is something that, you know, I did want to mention before we start, is, you know, this is a general comment from me, but it felt like this chapter really had quite a lot of stuff that was rushed into it at the last minute by staff. You know, there's really no nice way to say it, right? But everyone here puts in a lot of time and effort, and we're all volunteers. We don't get paid to sit here. So, you know, I personally find it somewhat disrespectful for all of us to see people, you know, who are paid to be here and do this work, you know, treat it like a, you know, 11 p.m. assignment for something that they have to get in before the deadline. So, you know, I know it's not the top of anyone's priority list probably in their various departments, but I would urge, you know, all of those people who are on the line and do contribute to this thing on a regular basis, you know, just to keep the rest of us in mind, because my feeling is that we're going to have to do a considerable amount of cleanup on this chapter because of that. And that means that we're going to be getting out of here at 8 o'clock like we got to do last time. And, you know, that's 1 hour multiplied by every single person who's sitting at this table. So I'm saying that because I don't think you'll hear it from anyone else. So please do keep that in mind. Alrighty, so I think the guys will do the same thing that we kind of did before, right? We'll do a little brief bit on the preamble and kind of just do that more open-ended and go around the table, and then we'll get into the goals and policies in more detail. So does anyone have anything they kind of just pick and choose wherever you want to talk about whatever preamble? And Paul gets first out of the gate.
Since we have the folks from the working on traffic demand management, when I read that section, I find it kind of exciting. I thought it's a cool idea. some of it sounded general, and I thought if we had a concrete example of how Flagstaff has done it, the only thing I could think of that I think is a good example, not, it's a few years ago when NAU worked with Mountain Mine to encourage people, raise their parking rates to discourage people from driving and work with Mountain Mine so people could get the buses to campus. You know, so that seems like it probably fits very well with traffic demand management. And if there's a better example, please use it. You know, give us a example of how Flagstaff are using TDM. Exciting, abstract idea, but say we're doing it, here's how. And if you could.
I can speak to Mountain Lion and
That's good because I've only been with Metro Plan for 5 months.
Your position has only existed for 5 months.
yeah, I would say honestly, every public agency, NAU has some TDM measures that they're doing, transportation demand management measures. City has some, Mountain Lion has some. I would say, at least for Mountain Lion, that example you just gave is a perfect example. So we do have an Eco Pass program, which several of the large employers in town are part of. I would say NAU is the best like use case because they have very expensive paid parking. It's not free parking. So yeah, Eco Pass is one example. When we did bike share is another example of like a TDM. So when we did have those spin bikes several years ago, that's another kind of TDM program that you can implement. Any sort of paid parking. So like with the city, with the meters downtown, that's a TDM measure. It's any kind of balancing of trying to incentives and disincentives. So whenever you can, yeah, make car driving either more expensive through paid parking or, you know, congestion pricing, that's, you know, another example, a little bit on more of an extreme side. And then incentivizing pedestrian walking and taking transit. Those are just a few examples, but yeah, we probably could put maybe some more specific.
Just quickly on how we incentivize it through the city is that, so if a development is passing out those eco passes or they're providing some type of a bike share, then you can get parking reductions. So we're incentivizing people to have less parking through using the incentives that Mountain Line provides that get them out of using a car and into different modes of transportation, just so it kind of comes full circle.
And we did debate internally whether this should be Flagstaff specific or more general. And one of the reasons we leaned away from that was because a lot of people don't like TDM when it's applied to them personally. So people who have to pay for more expensive parking,
I was gonna say, I know a couple of people
it's like it
bike to
intensely.
NAU and do not like the fact that they have to pay a lot more.
Or they had 2 cars and they want that extra parking. Apartment complex.
Yeah, and so it is not a universally popular, local programs are not universally popular. We've had a hard time measuring how effective they are. NAU does a really good job at that, but like Kim said, her positions existed for 5 months. We identified the need for her position in 2018. And it took us 5 years just to fill the position. So we are very nascent when it comes to a truly regionally coordinated TDM program. We have had some TDM practices implemented in different settings across the region, but not under a central coordination process, not in a way that was strategic at that level. So places that do that strategically at that level, one of the women I went to college with is the Dallas area MPO manager, and they have a hugely well coordinated across all these different municipalities, and they can measure their success. We're just not there in 2024. It's where we wish we were in 2024 from a staff perspective. But it's been a long time to get our process going. So that's kind of a balance to think about. What would you want in this section? What would be most effective?
You're not there, Sarah, though, because Dallas has whatever, 6 million citizens and we have 70,000 or.
I mean, it's, there's not, until recently, there haven't been like, a lot of transportation planning is done on federal programs. And there haven't been federal money that's like, let's help people start TDM programs until very recently. Dallas and bigger municipalities started their own TDM programs as they wanted to figure out how to do the work and they had the resources to create a program like that.
Add one thing, I think also there's not any requirements in Flagstaff, so even like Phoenix, for example, quality is so bad. So there's actually requirements for businesses to do like a trip reduction program. And for certain developments they have to have certain requirements for the development. So we're not there, and I don't know if that's where we're heading to, but that's also one kind of caveat of why Flagstaff, it is kind of random programs or, different agencies doing different things, but there's not like a comprehensive approach. But yeah, there's just no requirements behind it.
I mean, again, they have 5.5 million people.
Yeah, but like Missoula, Montana, they have a really robust TDM program and their size. So I don't think it's always population. I think though that can be a big part of it is when your air quality has gotten so bad that there's requirements attached to it. Like Flagstaff, we're not there, which is a good thing that our air quality is still good, but yeah, we just don't have those requirements attached.
Jenny and Martin have their hands up and we want to add something in the chat. Jenny first.
Make it quick, guys, 'cause we don't want to spend too much time on each individual issue.
Sure thing. Hi, this is Jenny Neiman, Climate Action Section Director. I'm sorry, I'm gonna try and get my camera on, but sorry, can't be there in person. I just wanted to add, to the questions of, right, like why people have it, why people don't. TDM is used because it's much more effective than using building new infrastructure. And so, TDM isn't just programming to get people to do things. It's also an idea of maybe we don't have to build this extra infrastructure because we can use infrastructure that already exists, whether it's a bus line, whether it's our sidewalks, whether it's our bike lanes. And so that is the most common reason that municipalities of all sizes adopt TDM, because it is, oh gosh, like maybe 10-1 on building new infrastructure versus accommodating it just with other modes. And so that's just something I think that's critically important to the conversation.
Martin, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. Not really that much different from Jenny's comments, but I just wanted to make the point that TDM often gets reduced to kind of a set of things that we do organized around a program, but really the value of it, and especially at a document the level of the regional plan, is that it's a philosophical approach of how we attack supply and demand of transportation and what we're doing about that end of it at a very philosophical level. The things that we do are the end result of that, but the start of it is what our policy is and what our philosophy is towards supply and demand for transportation. That's it. Thank you.
Anyone go ahead?
I just have something under streetscapes, and I'm sorry I didn't catch this during the review period, but shouldn't that have something in it about signage?
Tell me more.
It makes a difference when you're driving down the street. Different signs can distract you or make it very nice or, whatever, make it more attractive or lighting. It just seems to me that should be included in here.
Want to just call box of the sign code then, sir? Big sign code, right?
I don't know if it's sign code that I hear Susie saying, or if it's more about creating that character of signage as a way of wayfinding and knowing that you're in a certain neighborhood.
Finding and
Like the big, like if you go down Camp Birdie right away, you see the big tower signs on the end, and we call those litter on a stick. But we don't permit a lot of those things. We don't permit billboards. A lot of that is tied to our dark skies, but we also just have a very minimalistic sign code.
it seems like that should be included in there, even though we already have that. It just seems like it should be there.
Okay.
You want Scott, any other, Tom, you want to go ahead?
I guess just a general comment specifically to TPM, but the other items as well. My impression that we took into it, a lot of the ideas and proposals and themes and so forth seem to work well days like today, but when we got 3 feet of snow and we're talking about walking to the bus stop and especially for people, like elderly people like me, it's, I didn't see where that was actually taken into account. And can have a harsh winter climate. See it mentioned anywhere in any of these things. Also, there's wordage about, those special needs folks and so forth. Nothing about the elderly. We have a growing elderly population in Flagstaff. I don't know what the percentage is now, but it seems as though that should be specifically taken into account. Of a large, we got these elder housing units being built like crazy and so forth. There's nothing specifically in any of these systems about how elderly folks will be able to get around in different ways. And, bike paths and bus stops and so forth are not what, especially in the winter, is not going to be helpful for them.
Tom brings up a great point, because until we can get everybody, on bikes and walking around and on the bus, then we're really just, writing words on paper and hoping for something to happen. So I think that your point is good, and I think if we put that, something to that effect in the plan, maybe it'll inspire folks to, build for that.
Our policy TS1, just so to bring some context. Of vulnerable road users to the primary consideration in planning for streets and transportation systems. We would definitely include elders in the list of vulnerable road users. It would be children, elders, people with mobility devices and assistance.
I understand that, but if you look at the specific suggestions, say that's not good for me. Right? That's not good for me in the wintertime, so there's not, it's fine as a hand waving gesture, but it doesn't seem to be being implemented in the specific ideas.
I'd like to support that idea in particular. I was a bicycle commuter for
Well, are you saying that as a fellow elderly person? Is that what?
for 15 years. I commuted every day by bike, and in snow I walked, but I was only 1.5 miles from my work. If I was 3 miles from my job, I would not have been able to do it.
Would have just.
So, if we're really serious about encouraging bike use, it has to include people further than 1.5 miles where they work. And there's not a word in there on how we're gonna make it.
I do. No, sorry.
To that point, Cascadia Partners told us that there were 2 things that needed to happen for the preferred outcome, which was zoning had to be amended and mountain line had to be expanded. And I'm not seeing that in this preamble or in our policies to expand mountain.
We talk about in there like how the overlap between density and single occupancy vehicle use.
We don't talk a lot about density in this chapter because we still have the growth and land use chapter to review. We did a lot. I know Estella and I talked a little bit about where does transit oriented development go, and I think we decided to put it in growth and land use, but it could easily go in here. It's become chapter. So we're trying to just be conservative about what went where, because that really is on the cusp between both being a transportation issue and issue. Yeah, and what Cascadia said when they said expand mountain line, they meant increased frequency, increased number of stops that can be met in a time frame, like new lines to areas with increased density, more ridership potential. And that's really, so they didn't mean expand, like start new lines out everywhere. They meant like to grow the network in a lot of ways. The rural transit is included.
And I think on the code thing, it's 2 parts. It's our actual engineering standards, design code, but then there's the other part about our actual zoning code, and that it gets in its own way of even achieving the minimum density. And then it talks about that not only is there the density that we have, but then there's the density that we need so that it can support transit. And so see that being something that we're going to be addressing in the growth chapter. I don't know if that gets to the point of what you're talking about, because we really will talk more about that and where these codes do need to change so that we can allow for the growth patterns. I don't know if that gets to what you're saying, and maybe we,
My point was really on the transportation end of it, that we're not referencing in this transportation section, the actual recommendations from the Cascadia partners, either in the preamble or in our policies. And I think that would help maybe push us in the direction that to achieve our goals.
And Robert's point kind of stands as a general comment as well, right? So much that we've established these scenarios that documents should be referencing how these things help us get to the preferred scenario. Anyone else got any,
I would just echo putting it in transportation. If I were interested in what's gonna happen to Mountain Line, first place I'd look in the plan is something called transportation.
I'll just comment, like, the transit section is very existing conditions, and I agree. I think we should put more what's referenced in our 5-year plan and even beyond, where we plan on expanding and yeah, where we plan on making improvements with, we get more operating dollars.
I think, Julie, go ahead.
Kind of felt like I was reading the CMP and I was reading the lengthy sections from the 5-year transit plan. And I was reading the ATMP. This is,
You have actually read all of those things?
I have. So actually, I mean, there was actually text taken straight from those documents, almost verbatim, if not verbatim. I just wonder if we have those, why are we reproducing these in the regional plan document? Before I have quite a few other comments, but maybe just starting there would be helpful for me to understand why we're taking 3 pages from the CMP, why we're taking 3 pages from Mountain Line's plan, from Metro Plan, when all those documents are out there.
I think that's several times, right? In terms of the usability of the plan of how do we reference stuff without just eating it. Not to just get words out of your mouth, but we've heard that before in other meetings.
On the other hand, unlike Julie, I haven't read all of these things. And so I think having some of this more than a phrase is important. So,
I'm looking at the transit section of the goals and policies. It's really short. But it does mention implementing, cooperate with Mountain Line in developing and implementing the 5-year transit master planning goals and objectives. We could reference that plan right there. Right? People could go see what that is. Of course, that only goes until
7.
then there'd be another one. So
I think that's kind of one of the nice things about it, right? Because I was just thinking earlier when Sarah made the comment about the arterials and collectors and that the actual this is actually out of date. I've had consultants come in from out of town and pull up that document from saying to go back and say, no, that's actually the old, you need to go to Metro Plan. So to your point, if it's referenced, people do go and access.
I think it's on the map in here, like the extension of the route that goes out to Woody Mountain Road. I think
That will be out of date, right? That'll be wrong.
Well, no, we should say Mountain Line adopts, they are not. They write there, all these 5-year plans have different purposes. Like Mountain Line's 5-year plan and the 5-year plan are about what applied for federal funding, right? And also strategically, but it's kind of both, like they are requirements of DOT. They are not necessarily the same as like a land use plan. So some things get repeated because in this different context, it has different legal. But yeah, I agree. If I could tell state of Arizona legislators to drop putting every arterial and collector into this regional plan, let us do it a little differently. Put that on my recommended things nobody asked me last.
So to go back to Julie's point, though, you mentioned again, right, that this is getting long, where there's options to shorten it by making reference to something else instead of just repeating it, let's do that.
I'd be happy to.
Is everyone on board with that suggestion?
And a hyperlink. Date too.
I should tell you, when I sent out the first draft of it, the chapter was 16 pages and it's now 25. So there was a lot of ads. I can go back to more like what we originally started. Easily remove 9 pages of information. I could do that in my sleep. I mean, and not that these were bad contributions, but like there were a lot of like, I want to take this sentences and make it 3 paragraphs because I think people are thinking of an audience like Paul, who's not read all the other documents. Maybe there's somewhere between what Julie would like to see, which is maybe 6 pages, and what would make Paul feel very informed, which is maybe 25 pages. I will attempt to find some middle ground in here.
I just want to add, because I think it's important from a usability standpoint, that if we have this plan and it's referencing verbatim stuff from the other plans, I think you're kind of hitting on the point, but as those other plans get updated, we start to have conflicts in all these plans,
Yes.
and that becomes a nightmare to implement. And so we could actually be doing ourselves a disservice by having that stuff in there. And so by not just linking it and saying here, we being more general, like how we do with the transit, that we recognize and we support that plan, and we're gonna implement it like no matter what iteration of that transit plan, that our goals should be in line with that. That will be better for us from a not having conflicts in the future. Whereas if we pull the language from the plans and we put it in the regional plan, and then as those other plans that fed this main document get updated, we might start to run into conflicts, and then we end up where we don't get what we really wanted.
And I will say there is no other streetscapes and parking plan. So when we look at that section and that information, just realize there's no companion document to that. There's the airport master plan, the mountain line plan. Like we have a lot of good transportation plans. Nothing in that streetscapes and parking have anything to reference. Just as a heads up.
I don't know if this is the right time to add it. I also think there is importance of understanding what the transit plan says, because as we do talk about growth with patterns, there's a lot of things that could be influenced by what they're trying to do, like how we develop subdivisions and how we update our subdivision codes. Make sure that we are getting placement of bus stops and other considerations that, so there is a connectedness to it. But it's maybe not, maybe we think it, like, it's not as maybe intuitive as you think, but it can guide how we do other chapters so that we can be supporting that plan. Also, I just want to keep that in mind for everybody.
Speaking of referencing things, we talked earlier about the grant that was just received to produce a regional transportation plan, right? Have the right title. So should we be referencing that in here somewhere?
It's been awarded yet, right? So you
No,
don't.
it's
Well, of course, the city it has been, yeah.
Yeah, and it is it's under strategies.
Is it? Okay, great.
Anyone else got anything from the,
I had a quick question about to the committee. I'm looking at the street section, and that's the only place that I really found something that kind of boldly stated that there was like an interconnectivity between the county and the city. Or there's like the roads and the trails and other things like that. And I was wondering if anybody found any other place, or if that paragraph was enough for us.
Page, who are you looking at?
Just the
Amy?
streets.
Yes.
Page of the paragraph, the street.
Page, like 3.
One of my concerns, one of the communities concerns about the connectivity with the city, and that's about the only place I thought that was kind of loosely referenced, but it wasn't very explicit. I wondered if the commission thought that that was important. If the plan itself said it enough times to each subset or whatever.
The line says that the mountain line has a van pull that goes through. Reference in here in the actual plan itself.
Mhm. Yeah.
It says Mountain Line has a van pool.
Yeah, it's like on page.
8.
No fixed route service, so that was my question.
Correct, yeah, and I think that's the next sentence below it, it says, if I remember
Currently no
correctly,
fixed
there's no fixed route in the county due to how our funding is.
Okay, that's what I wanted to.
Thanks.
Would this be the right time to address Abel's email? I only saw Abel's.
There were no other like substantive comment emails. There was a little back and forth about definitions and it is in the public comments folder, but
Want to do that or do you want to wait? Go ahead. Wherever you ask me to do it, I will do it. I didn't send it to everybody. I just sent it to Sarah.
I sent it to everybody.
See it. Last week.
But there was quite a few comments in here. It was so big, I concentrated on just one. And this suggestion idea came from a group of people through coffee clutches, in-person meetings, and what's that net, that app? That door. And this is the suggestion. It's not anywhere in this material. And it's not really addressed out any of this. And that's that we need to build a parkway being defined as a good place to get from here to there. The parkway officially is something else, okay? And so what this group of people have suggested, and if we could turn to page 4.
Something that circles the city kind of.
There. What they've suggested is we have a parkway that goes around the edges of Flagstaff that misses the congested parts of town. That if you want to go to the east, you want to go to the left, you take this parkway to get out there. Now you can go out west or you can go out east, or in fact, if I could put this out, it would come in, hit the airport right about here, get on this way to go west. Okay, and then from here, go on up to Vaderville. From here, you would also catch it, the airport, catch that one road that parallels I-40 and hit the freeway at Continental. The point is that you miss all the traffic that's in here. And that's, in a nutshell, I'm not saying that, I'm just giving it a conceptual idea of what it would look like. I don't really know where it's gonna go, if it even gets accepted, but the point is, you come in, you no longer go downtown unless you want to go downtown. Otherwise, you go right, you go left, you go around. And the concept behind it is our sister city in Prescott and Prescott Valley has what I called a parkway. And when I called them, they said, well, we don't have a parkway. We have Fain Road and we have 89A. And it looks like a freeway that goes it's north and east of town. And you get on it and you go all the way to Prescott, or you can turn off and go to Jerome, or you can go to Chino, or you can go into Prescott or Prescott Valley through the intersections that are down there. There are no intersections. It looks just like a freeway. You just get off and go, but you can get there quickly. It increases capacity, something that in here talks about decreasing. And I strongly object to that, especially since in the beginning of this material, it talked about increased single vehicles were up 73%, and it went up in the last few years, since this was put in place, and walking and buses have gone down to 27%. So I think most of what Flagstaff wants and needs is an increased capacity by building skirting parkway. Allows us to get to the right, to the left, and get around Flagstaff if we really want to, and not be sitting in traffic in downtown or East Flagstaff. So that's the suggestion in a nutshell.
Question to staff is, how does that, we have things in the plan that justify that type of thing? Because I mean, I look at I-40 and that would, to me, be the same as having another adjacent to I-40. But I could see the benefit of something happening to go to Snowball. Is there things in the plan that kind of open our minds to ideas such as something that goes up to Snowball?
Well, I'll let some other people weigh into this, but I am pretty definitive on, I participated in the 180 study. I have read every study of a 180 bypass that we've produced in the last 20 years. We've spent $800,000, city and the county, studying a 180 bypass. And it is never going to be cost effective to build. And one of the reasons is, unfortunately, I think that people did not recognize this perhaps, or maybe people didn't put two and two things together, but the most cost-effective option prior to 2010 would have been to cross Observatory Mesa, as Abe's drawing showed. But we purchased those state land parcels as open space using money that required a conservation easement that specifically says we cannot build roads. So we already precluded our ability to do that in a close to Flagstaff kind of way, and building it further out and never get the kind of cost benefit ratio that would make it eligible for federal funding. Without federal funding, it is unlikely to get the Forest Service to participate in creating the kind of permits that would be needed for a road like that. And it also is way outside, it would eat every transportation dollar for new roads we have for 50 years. So it is, I mean, I just want to say, we can say we want to keep considering it, but we can spend another $1 million coming up with the same answer. And the answer will be the same. We've been studying it long enough that it is highly unlikely to change. And that is, you know, I still think there's a lot of people in the community who think it's a great idea. And we can do as many studies as we want, and it'll still be a vision they want to see in a plan. And it's been in our last two plans, and we have studied it every time. So I just need to be on the planning side, like super clear when we talk about the plan being feasible and implementable, that idea is no longer feasible or implementable. Now,
The reason why it's not in this.
there's a reason why it's not in this plan, like both legal and financial. Now, the south roll like area, south of 66, that is a different question. It's just, I was just talking about that leg of it.
Yeah, and I was just making the point that that seems like the only one that would make sense because we already have so many roads, JWP, I-40, all the other ones.
But I mean, we could talk about, should we be these out so they have less jogs and connect better? You know, this is, I think, the network somewhat on the landscape and what's feasible, but I think going through this, through the Continental golf course would be an opportunity if their golf course goes bankrupt, but maybe not before that.
Yes.
And I'm playing golf there tomorrow afternoon, so I'll go.
And it's not, and that's not, if the Continental Golf Course were to collapse and go bankrupt, that might not be the one idea.
So this one's really hard. So this is a complete shift. The language in this section of transportation is a complete shift of what we've been doing. This is basically a white paper on the big shift. It's essentially what this transportation
section. That's how it reads. That's how the policies are set up. So what's challenging is in that spirit, that's not about addressing congestion. It's not about vehicular travel necessarily. This is a different direction. This is going a completely different direction. So one of the large challenges that I have seen lately, in 2018, voters passed a transportation tax renewal. 20 years, starting in 2020. So this goes through 2040. 200 something $million on congestion relief. So it included Lone Tree widening. It included John Wesley Powell Boulevard, which is kind of that loop to the south. It included Butler Avenue widening. And it included West Route 66 widening. Right after that passed, carbon neutrality plan came in. Set VMT, reducing vehicle miles traveled, reducing, focusing more on having different priorities. Right on the heels of that, we had the ATMP that came in and also compete. And some of these are competing values where we've got competing values between congestion relief. And honestly, we can't ignore the 50,000 vehicles per day on Milton and the 30,000 vehicles per day on Butler, 30,000 something vehicles per day on Butler. So this is a huge challenge. And what's happened is that we have a transportation tax. We have plans that are coming out after it. And if you'll notice, those projects aren't under construction. Those projects they haven't happened yet. They haven't started yet. Because now every project that's coming forward is going through a big policy debate at council, whether or not to move forward. This has been it's costing time, it's costing a whole bunch of money, and there needs to be clear direction from the community and support in the direction we're going. And when I hear you say, Abel, about, people getting frustrated about congestion in their vehicles and needing alternate routes, that's different than what we're reading in here. What we're reading in here, what we're hearing is we want people to be, have more options for more frequent transit and regular transit service and get people on bikes and get people walking. And that's just really hard. Tourism is our #1 industry. We have a winter. We have a non-grid network already with not a lot of land availability left for redevelopment or for new development. It's mostly going to be redevelopment. It's mountainous. We have I-40 bisecting the north side of our city from the south side of our city. We have a bunch of charter schools, no busing. We have FUSD, who's reducing their busing. We've got a housing affordability problem that's pushing people out into the outskirts. And we're tight on land availability. So I love the dream big. But this is just a difficult chapter. So, that's the context of like the struggle that we're facing, the struggle right now that we're dealing with. We want to deliver these projects that were promised to voters in 2020. How do we move forward these projects? Recognize that that's what voters approve and bring in these new policies and make sure that it's going to work out. So we have voter trust. The next time we go out and we ask for a transportation tax or ask for more funding to do more work.
I see what you're saying, Judy. I think there's
I do understand that. I understand, but it is what's being requested. And because it's not here is the exact reason I am suggesting.
Yeah, no, I think she's agreeing.
No, I agree with you. I'm glad you brought it up because that's where the friction is, and that's what we have to figure out as a group to make a recommendation to staff is what are the priorities of the community and how do we reduce that friction? Because the regional plan, what we do here is going to drive the changes to the engineering standards, which are going to drive our transportation project. So the language in here about VMT, about TDM, about greenhouse gases, in about a year from now, or a year and a half from now, we're going to be at council seeing the engineering standards reflecting that. Those projects look
I think, Julie, I mean, the,
big.
and I pick up on like what you said. When you talk about being a white paper, right, and it does feel a little bit like we've got something that's come out of you know how when you say no offense, it's because you're about to say something offensive. Yeah, so is that it comes to a certain extent out of a bubble of like thinking that folks like Estrella, like Jenny, like Martin, right, in multimodal planning, sustainability, transit, and you know, to a certain extent yourselves, like you live in that world and eat and breathe all that stuff all the time. But a lot of people just don't want to be late to work in the morning because there's a lot of traffic. You know, and so like how do we balance those two things, right? And I think Julie also makes a good point. Right? You see people willing to vote to tax themselves to reduce traffic, right? They're kind of sending a relatively clear message. You know, so how does that combine with what we're also hearing, which is need to, when we can and when feasible, encourage people to use, you know, vehicles other than, you know, internal combustion.
Or the public transit system. I mean, it's also the concept that, that since it's bike to work month, I've went out and ridden my bike and I noticed that from my house to work, I actually make it the exact same amount of time getting there, 1 minute longer getting back. And from my house to downtown on the bus, it takes me 2 minutes longer to get to City Hall than it does in a car. But for people who don't want to try to do that in the first place, they're always going to want to be in their car with their kids behind them in their car, going to the City Hall in 3 cars or whatever. So this, what we're speaking to in the plan is speaking to a shift in mindset. And what we're still hearing from the community is, let's just go back to the old way where everybody could have 3 cars and drive 2 of them at once. Robert?
To add to Julie's point, there are a lot of contradictions in the draft plan. Widening roads doesn't make people drive less, it makes them drive more. Reduce demand. The roads you put out, the more cars you get. So traffic reduction rarely happens by making more roads. Making better roads is a way that you can get people to drive faster. And that goes back to our engineering standards. When you have really, really wide roads and lots of them, say in Cheshire, and you want people to drive slower and drive less, you take lanes away. You don't give more lanes. And so there's a lot of these things in our plan, such as we want to make it easier to bike and to ride your electric micro devices to work. But then in the next sentence, we say we want to make roads and more connectivity. And we want to reduce cul-de-sacs and put a road in there, but that also takes away from trail. So I see a lot of those contradictions in our plan. I'm wondering, is there a way that we can have a high level agreement on what the transportation should look like in the year 2045?
We'll go do one more and then I want to start getting into the goals and policies.
I guess just in that regard, in 2018, I voted for those expansions. Read it and thought it was the wrong damn thing to do. So I would like us to move in the other direction. I made a mistake. I agree with Robert that building more makes things worse. You look at Phoenix, they got the 101, the 202, the 303, 3 disasters that create more congestion. I do not want to go that way.
So let me talk about connectivity for a second before we move on. So, road connectivity is a really, I think you've brought up the exact issue, is it's really challenging because having good road connectivity is one of like the top things we can do to support all these shifts we want to see. It does eat into available land unless we make those roads very narrow and focused. So when we try and do, I think Martin and I have talked about this a couple of times, when we try and make every road have every feature, park sidewalk, parkway, bike lane, parking, 2 giant travel lanes that can fit a fire truck, another lane of parking, another bike lane. Those roads are huge. They're 100 feet wide. Narrower roads with higher connectivity, and maybe sometimes not all the same features, are really what we're trying to get at with connectivity. And that's the difference. The way engineering operates now, and Jeff, please feel free, Steph, to chime in here, is there is a collector road standard. We apply that to every single collector road. That's our standard. Moving to having a master streets plan is like the key shift here. And I know it's kind of buried, and maybe it needs to really be like umphed up here somewhere based on what I'm hearing. Because it lets you say this road can look like this and this one can look like this. And collectors that are trying to accomplish this can look like this, and new collectors trying to do this can look like this. And it lets us differentiate these bigger categories of roads in ways that might help us accomplish more of this without it feeling like a conflict. And that is kind of the key work of getting a streets master plan done. Here's one of my Flagstaff is weird things. Every other city I'd ever planner for or lived in and looked at the plan has, had like a wide variety of things, like this sector of town gets treated like this and this like this. And the status quo in Flagstaff has been like citywide all the time, no real differentiation. And then we tried in 2011 to kind of say, well, places with the transit code get a differentiation. But this really is like overdue necessary work.
The ones in the transit code then didn't get.
Exactly, and then they didn't get carried through into the engineering session, so we probably shouldn't have put them in a zoning code, we should have put them in an engineering code. And it has been very difficult, I will give this credit to engineering staff, every time they bring forward engineering standard updates, it is a very challenging conversation. So I would love for this chapter to be a better guide to help get them to the other side of that challenge, because it is really critical for all these other policies. And it's got to balance affordability and carbon neutrality and the needs of people to get to work on time, which makes transportation a really challenging thing overall. So besides just meeting all the state requirements, I think that, you said it felt like lots of things were shoved in here at once. I think that's a misperception of what I think you're calling out in the chapter. What I think you're calling out in the chapter is we have a lot of different documents talk about their vision for how to get to this 2045 future. And we all want to see each of those documents reflected in this chapter. It's a different approach if we say this chapter is drawing the 2045 future, and we will keep refining those other documents to get us there. Am I hearing that that is a preferred approach to this chapter? That's kind of what I was picking up. But if that's not what you're putting down, then let's have a quick visit on that.
I agree on it, yes.
Yeah.
Reword it, I wasn't, that last 2 sentences, I didn't really follow.
Sure. So the way it is right now is you're right, like I'm cross comparing with like what's in the carbon neutrality plan and what's in the AT&P and what's in the transit plan. This could be rewritten from those documents all get us there, but this is our 2045 vision. And the details of how we get there should continue to be refined in those other documents.
Yeah.
And make sure we are not, because I struggle in transportation too. And Jeff and Martin and I have talked about this extensively, and even Jenny and I too, I think, that there's the safe systems approach and the vision zero and the road to zero. And there's the active transportation model. And there is TDM, and there's this, and there are 20 frameworks under the umbrella of transportation that are all trying to get us somewhere. And we've listed most of them here, but if it doesn't feel cohesive, then maybe we need to take a step back from the background section and figure out a more centralized, thoughtful, what's our 2045 future way of approaching it.
We distill down what the common kind of goals and themes of our each of those plans and more address it from that way.
Yeah,
I'm saying that these are the common themes and threads between these. And how do we help move those plans forward?
yeah, that's a big rewrite, and I'm probably gonna call the team together to do it and edit viciously. If that's the direction you would like me to head. But I can see why you're all coming to read this chapter from a valuable perspective. But you're right, we read it sometimes from our technical side.
Let's, before we make any more comments, can, Sarah's asked a specific question. We'll use the 5-finger approach because we haven't done it yet.
Sure.
You want to give me, does everyone know how it works? So up to 5, how much you like Sarah's idea. So I'm giving it a 5, so you can go ahead as far as I'm concerned. Anyone else?
4 is okay, 3 is passable, 2's not interested, 1's nah. Everybody should put a hand up if, whatever it looks like for you.
Do 3.5.
3.5, kind of gets you there.
I mean, it'll be, when you bring it back, you'll have enough.
Yeah, what is,
Thrown at
what's the concern from the 3.5s? Like what like makes you feel like hesitant on it?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you have in mind. Julie's statement, I think, was profound, and we really need to think about it and incorporate it into our work. The fact that the taxpayers that voted the tax than to pay more money for an objective is profound. And Bill, or Paul, I'm sorry, I realize you changed, right? But there's a lot of folks out there who didn't change their mind. And if we, and the concern I had in reading through all of this is that it really ignores that, and it has an entirely different plan in mind, a different goal in mind, a different purpose in mind. So we have a transportation plan that contradicts the will of the people. But I think whatever you do to rewrite it, we need to not do that.
Maybe we need a section here on 419 and 420 specifically, because every single project in 419 and 420 is assumed to be delivered in this plan. It's just saying we're not going to do a lot more. We've kind of hit maybe besides the Woody Mountain area, we've hit the top of what those kinds of investments are capable of providing the community's future.
Our plan cannot repeal this.
And it would not, but I can definitely, I think if there's one thing I would add, it's maybe a 419-20 summary. Make sure that's clear.
Guys, I want to stop and take a break for 5 minutes, and then we're going to get into the actual goals and policies.
Say something really quick. I think it's okay if the direction that we're going changes for 2018, 2024, right? We can change that. So I think we're in a better place now than we were in 2018. Lots of things. I think that's just that's a natural thing that's gonna happen because you're planning 10 years out. Next path.
I just think quickly too, in setting up the chapter, conversation that's come out here is nowhere reflected in the document per se. Is there a way of saying, you know, this is, yes, you talk about this point in time in the various narrative, but it's like, how do we pull together at this point in time? This is the situation in a very short context. An assumption is being made that we can address congestion, blah, 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 just very upfront. It's in various, it's kind of peppered throughout, but your point's well made, and the point about people sitting in cars, they got to somehow see that they're not going to be sitting in cars. Probably, I mean, just as the setup, sitting in congestion at the end of by 2045. So what's the logic that takes us from there to here? In just very succinct terms so that people know the assumption behind this. Because it's just kind of scattered in the chapter. It's not coalesced.
There is one person.
Who's online? Sorry.
Jenny has a hand.
Hi there. I know we're trying to close, but I wanted to add one thing. There's a lot here and really appreciate the discussion. I wanted to throw out possibly a proposal, and I agree that this chapter has a lot, and I think that that's probably because this chapter didn't really put forward a vision of our transportation system. And I would put to the committee that there is a vision of that transportation system in the scenario planning. And so that talks a lot about transportation, and it references some of the things that Sarah referenced before. There's a lot of reasons to try to move our transportation system out of what it is right now, that don't have to do anything with carbon neutrality, frankly. Our transportation system right now is as inequitable as it gets. So you all mentioned it as equity. It's as bad for affordability as it gets. And frankly, also, congestion solving by roads doesn't work, as some people wrote and sort of said before. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, that I think that your preferred scenario actually agrees with that. And it talks about infrastructure costs, and it talks about housing costs, and it talks about housing and transportation costs together, because those are people's two biggest expenses. And so I actually think that the answers are already in the room in some way. So I just wanted to offer that, because the preferred scenario actually speaks to a lot of this, and it speaks to the density gains that we need. So I think that a lot of the answers to these things, we actually have the data to back up a lot of what we're saying in this chapter, and that it's in that scenario. Thanks.
That's a good add.
Everyone, let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come, well, actually, let's just come back at 7:30. We'll get into the actual goals and policies.
None of us can talk for
stuff. It's an area worth.
Wait to hear more. That might be all of them.
No, we're gonna, cause really, they're just not educated. Running the streets.
Yeah.
Sit down so we can get started again.
You're right. I didn't really-
That moment.
Maybe.
No, I haven't.
You said the word.
I'm gonna start going through the goals and policies like we normally do. We do only have an hour and a half if we're gonna try and up on time.
We need to reserve about 15 minutes to talk about the agenda for the next meeting.
15 minutes, which doesn't seem reasonable, but we'll see what we can do. I was just wondering, because I've been thinking about this and it's kind of somewhat to Julie's point. Also, I think because for me, right, I focus on this document has always been about as an end user, like how to make it as practical, usable as possible. And, you know, I think we're seeing, like you said, it has been marketed, the big shift. I just wanted to do like a little story. Wondering we talk about a lot of different transportation options here. I suppose let's do it this way. If you didn't drive a car here today, put your hand in there.
Carpool, silent pool.
Yes.
We carpool.
Carpool.
Didn't drive a single occupant.
Didn't drive a single occupant. So that's good. Drove an electric car.
Hybrid, but that count.
It does count. I'd say, let's say it counts, Susie. Good for you.
It works, but not here.
Like,
Like
it's
I
too
rode my
dark.
bike to work today, but not here.
Yeah, right.
So that counts. Yes.
Oh, it doesn't count.
Technically, there is no.
So,
Here, so.
but Paul, so I mean, I would say then, like, there's a general, right, because it helps me understand it, like, you're an avid bike rider, right? Like, you mentioned it earlier, like, when you said, oh, when it snows, so why didn't, we were gonna talk about increasing bike usage, why didn't you bike here?
Because Rick was driving his electric car.
Right next by you, so it's,
Yeah, he's, I'm kind of on the way, so I said, sure.
So the reason that I didn't bike here today is because I have to start I'd have to start at 4:10. To get the bus to take me as far as I can to here, and then and it would take me 45 minutes to an hour to get home. I have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
and it'll be dark.
Yeah, exactly.
66 is horrible driving on a bike, particularly at night. I can't even imagine doing it at night. That's why I didn't. I'll try.
interested to hear what people had to say. Alrighty, let's get into it. And I think we will try to move through these really quickly. So if you really don't have anything that you really, really want to say about something, what my mother used to tell me, say anything at all. She only said that if I was saying mean things to my brother. But, so we'll try and move through this relatively quickly. So let's start off with I won't read them out to also help save time. So does anyone have any comments on goal TS and policy TS1? Any implementation? Julie, hit us with it.
I would suggest just dropping for people, goods and services. It's good. Don't need to have inclusive transportation. Just read after options. And then vulnerable road users on TS1, I assume there'll be some description there about, you know, so that might go back to what Tom was talking about.
Yeah, is that a zero, like a zero, what do you call it? Goal zero thing?
I'm sorry, was that a question?
It's a question. Is the primary, the vulnerable road users and the primary consideration thing about zero language?
Yes.
Just define that, right?
Yeah, it was just a,
A good call.
yes.
So this is just saying, make sure people don't get killed by cars. Any of us disagree with that?
With that. I don't disagree. I think there's a contradiction between that statement and the next one about narrower neighborhood street. Narrower neighborhood streets and of making things less accommodating. Right? Of driving down the street as an elderly person, you have cars closer to you. You have multimodal transportation, you have people on electric scooters and bicycles weaving in and out. I think that makes it a lot more difficult for an elderly.
I'd like to support you in that, because Sunnyside, we had all of the neighborhood curb and gutter. City took it upon itself to narrow the wider roads in Sunnyside. They pissed everybody off. Because now you have these narrower roads that makes it difficult to quickly and easily move through your own neighborhood. So I support you in that. You don't want narrower.
Michelle, and then let's just remember, guys, we got to move pretty quickly.
Right. So when we took the field trip to go see the resource map and we went to the neighborhood that had the narrower streets, it was actually from a residential neighborhood. It was much more pedestrian friendly and family friendly and biking friendly. I mean, you have here neighborhood streets, and I don't know what a neighborhood street is, but my question to you guys was going to be, does this particular recommendation address what we saw on our tour and get to those neighborhoods that actually felt more pedestrian friendly?
I don't know if Martin or Jeff wants to talk about this. See who's gonna unmute.
The same question about where they should be promoted. Can we
Yeah.
define where they should be?
Yeah, maybe that.
Because it says should be.
It's interesting, it's just that
I mean, I think I think the streets master plan is where the where question will get answered. I think where is too specific. I wouldn't even have a map of arterials and collectors in this plan if you let me, and getting down to neighborhood streets would be a little
I
further.
was thinking a broad statement.
And I will say, yeah, and I will say vulnerable users, a senior in a car is less vulnerable than a pedestrian or a bicyclist to having a serious injury or a fatality in a narrower street. Actual, like, there's a lot of like the techniques behind this, and there's a lot of data behind it that narrower street feels less comfortable to drive in, which is what makes it safer. And that's actually, sometimes we call that like friction, like not because you're actually hitting anything, but just narrowing the street, making it a little more cautious, making you more cautious as a driver. So you're not getting in a free flow mindset as you're driving, actually increases safety of all the users on the road. And that there is study after study after study after study that shows that. So, you know, as someone who has driven a lot in my life, it did when I learned that first, I had to think about it. Because it feels inconvenient, but you remember what you're preventing is a serious injury or death.
Since you said think about it, I just want to briefly say something, David, sorry. So a lot of what I'm hearing is from those that have changed their mind and stuff from the time we did that tax and everything, is education is the only thing that's changed. The only thing that's changed is education. That's it.
And I have one specific comment on the implementation guidelines, the reference to fewer or talking about the connectivity and more grids, right? Less circuitous roads and the way that connectivity reduces travel time for non-vehicle users, right? Like that's the kind of goal. The fewer to no cul-de-sacs part felt just way too specific for me. Understand why it would be in there, but like to me, that's a strategy. Fewer to no cul-de-sacs is a strategy for that particular implementation thing. And then I'd also kind of like us to just reference the fact that topography has an impact in terms of a grid system, right? I lived in San Francisco where their planners, right, back in whatever that was, 1885, slapped a grid system right down on top of the city there. So I think there's something to that. Does anyone else have any other comments, or should we move on to TS2? Move on. Alrighty, so TS.
Comment.
Okay, go Tom.
I think the last two are also contradictory. Converting car lanes into bicycle infrastructure and micro mobility zones, and at the same time narrowing them to design traffic flow. And then down in actually connecting to TS2 to achieve zero fatalities. It seems like to me, we're making the roads more dangerous. We're making them narrower. We're putting multimodal transportation on them. And we're working to achieve zero fatalities. We're making conditions. I mean, I'd love to see some of those studies because I just can't believe that narrowing a road, putting multimodal transportation on it is going to make it safer for anybody.
Let's do that then.
And this also, I want to agree with you that, and response to Diane, in our neighborhood in Sunnyside, they're narrower, but they put sidewalks. It's safer. It's safer because for the walker, it's frustrating for the driver.
It sucks.
Isn't that the big shift? I mean, this is the road right now.
That's the philosophy versus. And with the face.
I mean,
So I read those, and this goes back to something you said, Sarah, that those are gonna apply to different types of roads. Like with having bike lanes, that's gonna be like the major roads. The residential roads. So are not applied to the same road.
Yeah, the narrower neighborhood streets is not about Milton and D6. But
Yeah, bike
but
lanes.
there is a real difference, like it is that safety. It is a shift because it's an accommodation, right? But Jenny put in the chat that it's important to you need to visualize it. Imagine the difference of yourself in whatever, it's icy, you're walking, whatever condition you're in at your most vulnerable transportation moment in downtown versus on Milton. In a snowstorm, has anyone ever seen people climbing over 5-foot berms on Milton? So maintenance, design, those conditions can all really change how. So just to think through it. And you know, like here, we're not getting into like every design feature on every road, but we're trying to create the guiding principles. So when the streets master plan is moving forward or an ADOT study is moving forward, it's heading in the direction we want. And also when there's a development application that includes road creation, those are getting the right pieces put together.
And smaller. Does that mean that we'll be making better use of our land? Living and doing everything? Okay, thank you guys.
Yeah.
I'll make the-
All right, so let's move on to 2S2, work to achieve 0 fatalities and 0 severe injuries on roads and streets in the Flagstaff region. Does anyone have any comments on this? I mean, this has kind of become best practice. Right? And that we should have a goal of 0. Is that right, sir?
Yes, we do not have a Vision Zero or Road Zero official policy in Flagstaff. We called out in the last regional plan that we wanted to have a complete streets policy. We didn't adopt one of those in the last 10 years either. So, you know, this is an aspirational statement. It doesn't make it so. I read that a lot in like other policy documents. They'll be like, we have this kind of policy, and what they have is a policy that says we'll get one. That doesn't mean you have one. This is that level of investment. Clear.
Is anyone, are we all good moving on to the next one? Yes. TS3, who cares about how we run our traffic control lighting systems? Anyone, Anthony?
I care.
Yeah, care that someone who knows what they're doing does it, I think. Does anyone really care? I'm sorry for being glib. To keep on.
I just have a
Yeah.
structural thing. Shouldn't there be implementation guidelines? Go with the policy?
We have not required implementation guidelines for all policies. Some have them and some don't. So, no, we didn't.
We have a TS 4A and 4B. We also don't have that anywhere else. Just
That's another city only, county only.
oh, okay.
It's just like WR, A and B, and E, A1, A and B. It's actually third place. We have it like that.
TS4, any comments? I feel like we've sort of talked quite a bit about connectivity already. Joe?
Are we going to implementation guidelines already? Yes.
Let's do A because A and B are different. Are they different or are they pretty much the same? No for implementation, then, yeah.
So I'm on the third implementation guideline, layered networks of roads. It talks about pedestrian paths. I was wondering if what about the word trails? Is that the same? I was thinking about foots. I was thinking about how people could commute to work. Is paths the word we want to use, or trails, or?
I'm gonna ask Martin to weigh in on that.
Do that offline and you guys can.
Yeah, and maybe because I think there's, we can talk about.
Yeah, I just hadn't heard that.
Some question, oh, sorry, yeah.
There was a guideline that was in the draft that we reviewed earlier, that talked about allowing neighborhoods to reclaim their streets through slow, safe and social zones, et cetera, et cetera. Did that go somewhere else, or is it out completely? Talking about was on the draft. Safe streets, slow, safe social zones to allow play areas, socializing space.
I think it got rewritten significantly.
I kind of like that one.
I'm trying to remember where it got rewritten. Can I look? And I'll raise my hand when I find it.
Kind of like, I liked it.
So. Anyone else? Before Jim? So when we say, so 4A and 4B, the implementation guidelines apply to both A and B. Is that correct? Because those all just sounded like things that. So that was what I was wondering.
I don't think we wrote any county implementation guidelines. Those are all like tied to urban and.
What does layered networks, what exactly does that mean?
And ask someone from transportation engineering to explain a layered network. Got 3 transportation planners and engineers on the call. With someone unmuted, please. You guys don't get to be this shy the whole time.
Hey, hi, this is Jeff. I didn't write this one, so I'm picking up on it. This is Jeff Bauman with Transportation Engineering. I think layered networks, at least the road, I'm most familiar with roads, trails, and bike and ped paths. Also, we have different hierarchies in the ATMP, right? We have class, Martin can help me, but class 1, class 2, these different levels of bike facilities. For roads, I think we're talking about arterials, collectors, local streets, layered networks, different classifications, different functions of those different facilities.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Joe.
Sure.
Then I had 2 comments. The 3 of them implementation guidelines that just seemed far too specific for me, and I was if they might be better served being in the strategies piece, right? So in suburban centers and corridors, collectors should intersect arterials at least every half mile. Feels to being an engineering standard than being something that belongs in a regional plan. Same thing, the urban centers and corridors piece, because it's the same thing. Except centers and corridors, neighborhoods too, in terms of talking. Is see something that talks more generally about how we're trying to achieve by doing those 3 things, as opposed to saying we must do these 3 things.
I did find the rewrite of the one Michelle brought up. Do you want me to jump to that?
Yeah, go for it.
Under SP3, we did change it to temporary street events should be encouraged for economic vitality, multimodal objectives, and community building, which is where we got to, that's what replaced the reclaim the streets, where there are opportunities for alternative routes for vehicles and bus traffic. And that was changed because there were people on the transportation side who said, I don't know how to tell someone if I've reclaimed a street. Like, it just doesn't mean enough in that context. So we went to this language, but if you want to get down there, if you want to look further at that.
And you define community building?
No, but we can.
You could define it, then I think it's the same thing. Sounds good to me.
Anything else you wanted?
I have some comments on, the last 2 talking about. So see what you're saying, David, and it might be fine to do, but what my question was, I read this is an urban center and corridor, and we don't have a 1/4 mile spacing or better. Are we going to add more roads to make that happen? The same question for, but you really can't change the block size, right? But what does this apply to? We have choices we can add. I'm thinking about like.
Well, we often have new subdivisions.
Yeah, and for a new subdivision, can we clarify that that's for new developments and not existing ones? Because I wouldn't want more roads built in existing urban.
We do sometimes, like on Milton Road, we've talked about having backage roads, like instead of those disconnected little roads, like having the ability to like have a whole set of backage road that connects on the east side and a whole one on the west side with short block connections to Milton. Would greatly increase the circulation, right?
So I cut through with the McDonald's parking lot.
Like where?
McDonald's parking lot could be a street, I guess. Instead of a parking.
It's me.
Just wanted it to be more thoughtful, like where appropriate, where.
Yes.
Sense kind of thing.
You want it conditioned so that it's clear. That it's not
fine if it's appropriate.
Demos
would need to have that added just because we said that.
We do try and encourage, like if you look at the Alara apartment building, like we suggested to them, like you should continue this grid into your parking garage area and like have a street that you can close off for street fairs and farmers markets. And they were very interested in that because they were kind of trying to build an urban setting. So it can be really useful even in places you might not think it is.
Right.
But yeah, but we don't like make it all the time.
I think so, but I just wanted some clarity on that. And I had one more on on this last one. Well, I put it in this last one because I was noticing that there's nothing about street crossings. Want to increase walkability and bike riding. Have safe street crossings, right? And there was one that, another one that is taken out, it said allow neighborhoods to reclaim their streets through slow, safe and social zones. That's the same one I just talked to. So what about street crossings? Can we just look at that again and make sure that that's covered somewhere?
Should we put that under MT1? Just about availability and use of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure?
Thanks, Michelle. Can we move on? TS5. Anyone have any comments on this one? This one feels a little bit like a, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we should do that. All right, TX6. Any comments on this one? This is driving demand reduction. Julie.
I have some comments on the implementation guidelines. I would prefer to see the directive about updating the TIA process to incorporate GHG. I feel like that's too specific for the.
I don't even know how the hell you do that.
And I think, and then how do you use that? What does that mean? That's, I would like to that in the engineering process when the time comes, rather than the regional plan.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree that
suggestion.
it's something that makes sense for if traffic wants to change their policies to include that because them and sustainability together have decided that that's a good idea, then that's the way that should be.
Because put it in strategies?
So I understand the goal. Yes. But that's not the way.
The complexity and the levels of what a TIA is and what it means for development.
Can I get staff to offer alternative language as a parking lot item?
No, I think if Julie would like to see it move to the strategies, then I think we can.
I'd like to hear more about sustainability and traffic have talked about doing this.
Both on the line.
Right. If they think they can do that, then why not have it in here? Or in the strategy or something.
Jenny?
Hi, folks. Yeah, Jody Neiman here. Yeah, it's not a particularly hard calculation. We generally plan for trips when we do TIAs. That's the whole point, to understand how many people are coming to a place. And so the idea is it's not that much further to go to understand the greenhouse gas emissions that happen from it. The reason is just simply because to reduce our transportation emissions, you have to work really, really hard to electrify your vehicles, and you have to work really, really hard to reduce VMT.
I mean, I think that kind of this is the question for us though, right? Like if they're just correlated, then if you have trips in your traffic impact analysis, then telling you that you need to reduce your trips just tells you that you're reducing your greenhouse gas emissions, right? So why bother having both? And I would push back really hard on the idea that it's quote, not very hard. Given, I'm the person who goes out and hires the consultant who produces their traffic impact analysis. And if I tell them, okay, you also now have to tell me how much carbon emissions you have to put in that, they're gonna say, no, I'm not. go find someone else to do that. So now I've just had to double, had to hire potentially to produce a number. I think you just said wasn't really all that important. So, yeah, I really don't like it.
Yeah, I wanna clarify. The number is important, and absolutely understood. We're trying hard internally to make the TIA process easier. That's gonna be part of our transportation master plan. So ideally, this all comes as a package per y'all's conversation.
I would like to see it as a strategy.
Let's move on then. So we're gonna try and move this quickly.
Are we going to the
So,
parking lot?
no, I don't want to put it in the parking lot. I'm gonna put it to a vote. So everyone who agrees with
There's
the
just
way
something in
that,
the parking lot already about incorporating total. To note that if those could mesh.
I want to ask, so, because I just want to be able to make sure that we can move on fast enough. So, everyone who'd like to see this particular sentence on updating the TIA moved into the strategies section, please raise your hand, vote. If you would like to see it stay where it is, do not raise your hand on that as a no vote. Oh. Needs to show hands. So I'd like to see it move into the strategies.
Your hand if you want to move it.
We're raising your hand if you'd like to see this part moved into the strategies section.
8 of 13.
Second graph. It's referencing new development planning for lowering greenhouse gas emissions, MT, so new development. I don't know how you that or what the outcome would be such that that would impact the development approval or whether or not it moves forward. So like with the TIA, you have a new development, you mitigate to what the TIA says. The greenhouse gas emission calculation for a new development process, and then what? Development. As you produce more, I just don't understand where it's going.
It's Jenny, but it go into the calculation of our, gas emissions. Might just be a calculation thing. Should ask Jenny.
Be, on, I think this refers on page 10, it says that we could require new development to allow electrical vehicle charging stations even in rental units. So right now, we don't. So if some renter wants to buy an electric vehicle, charge it, the one that's charging. Plug it in to their outside their houses.
State development is something bigger. I just don't know where this is headed.
How would you mitigate to offset if
I
it
don't
showed the carbon? I think
understand.
that's
And
the
so to
question.
just have this and then this gets put into an engineering as standard as a requirement. This implementation guideline. What?
So California as a state has this. There is a whole state of case studies on how to implement this implementation guideline.
They do.
What they do, is they set, and I'm gonna explain this as simply as possible because I'm not letting the engineers do it because I've heard the longer explanation. So I'm gonna give you the very short explanation, which is that they identify a regional average for emissions. And if your development proposal produces more than the regional average, you have to do more improvements and more mitigation. If you're below the regional average, then you basically have many, many fewer offsite improvements and you have to do a lot less. And so they basically create a threshold. And if you can get your trip generation and vehicle and your greenhouse gas emissions below the threshold, then you get a very simplified public improvement cost scenario than if you are above that threshold. That's like the third grade explanation of a process that is way. That's roughly how it is.
Because it's so complicated to put it in as an implementation guideline and sentence in the regional plan makes me very nervous because I I don't
Transportation engineer and you don't understand what the hell they're doing.
I don't understand where it's going. It's not that I don't want to reduce GHG or that I don't want clean, by no means. I just don't know how it's going to be applied.
I have a third grade question. So wouldn't that also affect affordability if they, I mean, I understand that you're holding their feet to the fire to make them do the right thing, but if they don't, then it just makes things more expensive too.
Yeah, the costs often are passed on to the property buyers or renters.
Back to Julie's point though, where does this go and do we take this again and put it as something else because it's not defined? You're saying that there's already a guideline, but I don't know where it is.
I'm just saying there are case studies.
Okay.
And other cities have made those transitions.
We make it a more general thing and a less specific kind of these other things that we're talking about, and you guys are able to do that offline. Going all right with that?
One quick comment, if it's an average-based system, I think the word average might be added to it. You know, if the experts are nervous about this and us that are asking the third grade questions are lost, I understand your explanation based on averages, but I don't see that anywhere in the language.
And I'd like to request that Jenny's talked to, brought into this.
Yeah, Jenny, do you want to add anything after my third grade explanation?
Yeah, thanks, folks. You know, Sarah described the California system. That's just one way to do it. I want to be clear that the idea is that right now the TIA process basically says how many people are going to drive here. What will we do to mitigate that? This just incorporates other parts of analysis. The goal is just to have a more well-rounded discussion through this process. And to be able to say, okay, instead of maybe you, and Michelle pointed out really well before, it's sort of TDM, right? It's a great, you can reduce your emissions and you can have lower fewer parking spaces, right? Things that actually save costs, right? Maybe you're providing bus passes, maybe you've located downtown and you don't need to do a thing, right? So it's really variable. I completely agree with the comments about specificity and I leave it to y'all to decide where it goes, but hopefully that helps. The idea is just to add a more well-rounded discussion about our impacts.
All right, let's move on to multimodal transportation.
That I'd like to keep.
Rewritten or as is?
Oh, I feel uncomfortable.
It says should, yeah, I don't understand it either.
All right, so what was the specific thing, Anthony, we're gonna stop on right here?
Oh, no, I just, well, after hearing the explanation of staff, it seems okay to me to leave it as is, as long as it's not something that is as strict as California requirements, so to speak. I can see why they want to have this conversation.
So can we trust staff to reword it slightly to kind of?
Absolutely. I'm for it all of a sudden. Thank you.
Can I ask if Julie, do you have a suggested reword?
Tom, I want to, let's move on to the next one because we spent enough time on this one.
Suggested reword.
I vote no on it.
We're gonna do goal MT and then policy MT1 and the implementation guidelines. I don't have any thoughts or comments on this one.
On the implementation guidelines already?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the first thought was, there was a guideline that used to be in there about filling in sidewalk gaps and the bike and pedestrian crossings. Is that all in that?
I think we moved that down to strategies.
Because the filling in sidewalk gaps, I think, is really important for walkability. And there were numbers up above that showed how many neighborhoods don't have sidewalks.
Kind of a follow-on. Michelle said, and it's the policy itself, and it says
Strategies now, sorry.
is the availability and use of pedestrian and bicycling infrastructure. I like the word connectivity there more than availability, because it comes down to a little bit of like what Michelle was saying, that it's like when there's more of an impact from having right, like 100-foot gap in the sidewalk or a spot where the urban trail ends, right? And then you can't get to where you're going. than there is from not having 2 miles potentially, right, of trail in a different place. I mean, my example is that, well, my kids both went to the same school and I didn't have to do drop off in separate locations and I would bike my kid to school. I would come down the open trail from my house, get into town site, which was fine. And then when you hit the railroad, I think you have to go on right under the overpass, on the sidewalk, and then back up the hill. And it's that tiny little bit of connectivity that just kind of ruins the whole trip. I know that's something that's a huge problem to solve in that particular case, right? I'm working on solving that, but it's just, that's to me why it seems that increasing that kind of connectivity, getting that sort of access is almost more important than increasing availability. All right with that one. That word didn't change. I suggested. Any other comments on this one?
I just checked, everything, Michelle, that you mentioned is in the strategies. They were too action specific.
Speaking of action specific, the section that the implementation guideline that talks about keeping everything free of snow, debris and blockages. A little too action specific. That literally are saying that the city is now going to go out and plow every single trail in town. It just feels like that should be a decision made at level then.
It doesn't say that. It just says that they should be maintained, that whatever policies we set should help us get there. I mean, there are many, and I think that's fair, like over the years, we've had a lot of conversations about who's responsible for clearing sidewalks. We've always determined that it's the property owner, but some cities have moved away from that because it doesn't promote walkability. Have, like you said, a little chunk of snow you have to climb over or cross. So, but it is a big cost. So it is like a bigger thing, but we tried to keep it clear. But as Tom said earlier, if we're thinking of vulnerable users, we have to address weather and snow somewhere. So like I hear 2 sets of comments about that in different settings that I guess what's the consensus on that?
Yeah.
Is it important or is it too detailed? I don't know.
I'm fine with you. I retract my comment.
I'm only gonna point out when you guys give me dissonance because I have.
Just looking at the screen here on Elsa's comments, I think rather than strike availability, just availability, connectivity and use. We're not gonna make it less available.
And how many words you want in a sentence?
Yeah.
I'm trying also not to have run-on sentences. But yes, I think.
Availability seems fine, not like I want.
David, to your earlier point, it does say foot trails should be maintained good condition and free of snow. So it seems like we're saying we should clear the foot trails. I'd be all for that if there was a way to pay for it. It'd be awesome.
I agree.
I mean, maybe it's just a matter of being maintained in good condition to ensure and then remove the 3 specific examples of how that's done. You guys can decide that. Let's move on. Okay, so we've got MT2A and MT2B. So these are ones that are one for the city and then one county. Because none of the implementation guidelines can really apply to them up, is that right?
It's going to be tied to specific classifications of streets and stuff. Like some streets don't have bike lanes. They're not that.
That's what we hope to do in the streets master plan. That's the idea.
Okay, we'll tie back to that. Okay, thanks.
Facilities.
All kinds of things. Separated bike lanes, traditional bike lanes, green paint areas, bicycle parking, bicycle storage, bicycle valet, there's
Kinds of stuff.
there's all kinds, there's whole manuals about it.
Cheshire Art Project.
The Cheshire Art Project, yeah. Very wide variety of things.
I ask, what is the legal status of complete streets? Is it an approved city policy? Is it, that, voters have approved, or what's the legal status?
Regional plan currently says we should have a complete streets policy. We do not have a complete streets policy currently.
So we're the first people saying it.
The previous regional plan, which
Previous
voters approved, said the city of Flagstaff should have a complete streets policy. There was not one produced in the last 10 years, despite, like I said, all things in the regional plan are aspirational, right?
I wasn't sure.
What we did in the last 4 years, and Jeff can speak to this, do a lot of staffing rethinking because we had tried for 6 years to get complete street policies and master streets planning done and not been successful. So some of the new positions and the rethinking of how transportation engineering is organized was pushed by the fact that we weren't successful with our previous organizational capacity and skills.
Thank you.
That's good. Oh, I see, Diane, you're hidden behind Robert.
I just want to register something. There's a lot of emphasis on micro mobility, but it seems it seems just a little strange to me. Not all micro mobility is equal. And hoverboards going down Beaver Street, which is where I've been seeing them. I mean, I don't know how you can juggle all these different micro mobility systems trying to have narrower streets. It just seems big stretch. And I think that there are certain transportation modes that really work, like e-bikes and other stuff, but then you got skateboard. Where are you gonna put these people? I don't, and who knows what the next thing will be that people invent, like segways that go 50 miles an hour or something, you know? I mean, it's just, it's sort of endless, the iteration of
There's a
these.
good example of that though, in the last 10 years, which is our e-bike policy. Like, we didn't think about e-bikes 10 years ago. There's nothing in the current plan about it. But the city council had a big discussion of what classes of e-bikes can be allowed on the Foots Trail. And those are the kinds of decisions they have to make. It's not about everything having its own facility. It's about having policies that help you determine who gets the dedicated facilities, who's going to be on what shared facilities. You know, sometimes the solution for like a bicycle improvement is to lower the speed limit so bikes are going a similar speed to cars. I ride my e-bike on the street in NAU because I am going as fast as a vehicle. Like, so it's very contextual. But it is just that they should be considering that there could be micro mobility inclusive of that, because when you don't, what happens is the micro mobility is there and it's plowing down a pedestrian, or it's designed in a way that people are kind of shucked off their hoverboards into the street. And so that's what this is really trying to get at. And that is something our current engineering standards have not been evaluated for that sort of thing.
It's evolving.
It's really evolving, and this is one of the uncertainty challenges. So we can word it differently. We tried to keep it super duper broad, but there's no way not to figure this out unless it's pretty chaotic. Like, you kind of get to,
It's like it imparts equal value to all things. Equal, I don't know. I mean, I think what you've just described is perfect. That's, you know, we need that. But the way that it's written up in this document, it seems like these are all equal things deserving kind of their equal space. That's the way I read it.
I can reword it.
Okay, thank you.
Guys, can we move on to the transit section?
A quick
Sorry,
clarification.
go ahead.
County roads, city streets. Just want to make sure we're consistent.
Yeah, I think that's how we should word it.
Yeah. County roads, city streets.
I'll put that up at the top.
Thanks.
We had somebody who kept changing everything in the drafts to roads, streets and highways. I'm like, we're not always doing the same thing. So I like that.
Does anyone have any comments on the, we'll just do the whole transit section as a whole. Does anyone have any?
Great.
I already had a comment earlier that really we should think rewriting the goals, so it focuses on expanding modal transportation and takes into account the preferred scenario language. Who said that? They brought it up.
Preamble.
Yes, during the preamble discussion. And I marked that down here under transit. Is that still okay? I need to focus on a transit and expanding transit and make this more in line with five-year plans, long-term goals.
You can just make sure, instead of using the word expanding, always like increase frequency and expand. They are two different things.
Can you clarify me for the first implementation guideline? Can you tell me exactly what? Also, we referred to development proposals, and here as well as in that other, talked about it a little bit, but a development proposal is not an actual right, used in the zoning code. So what does that mean? That is a zone, is that a subdivision plat? Development agreement, like what are we talking about?
I didn't write this, so I don't know.
No, something just wanting in general, like, so what, two questions right then, so development proposals, and I don't suppose I need an answer, I would just like it to be clarified what a development actually entails. And then what does it mean by should contribute to the public transportation system?
You're asking me from a planning standpoint, I wouldn't know how to, I didn't write that, and I don't know if they're talking about development proposal from a road project standpoint, or private developer, and I think that's what you're saying, is that,
I don't know.
right, because staff would not know how to implement this.
What does should contribute to the public transportation system?
Sarah, this is when we were on the phone talking about it. It was like, yeah, new developments, like if a bus stop is warranted, you know, provide either the infrastructure for that. Yeah, mostly, I guess, when it comes to the capital improvements. So, but yeah, there probably is a better way of wording that.
We just talked about bus stops.
I mean, ideally, I think we had operations in there, but then you're mentioning that that will get struck down by legal. So I think that we made it more broad. Yeah.
You can't require that is the issue.
Not to antagonize Julie, but would it make sense to maybe mention TIAs in this section if you're talking about development proposals?
We had TIA and it got moved to the parking lot. I think we're done talking about TIA or strategies.
So the CIA should look at the transit need as part of the overall, that's part of what we, it seems like that is the direction we should be going as we.
Instead of, yeah, most TIAs tend to focus solely on mode of traffic. It'd be nice if there was an emphasis in our planning documents that said, you know, buses are actually more important for your new facility than a turn pocket. I know that that's an engineering standard and we'll never get there, but we'll, that's just my comment.
And this really comes out of H and Timber Sky. Those last two developments, when there wasn't anything there for NAH that as part of their proposed development that they would have to accommodate transit. They agreed to. But it came from that. And then I think there was also some Timber Sky and Mountain Connections and doing a large development in West Flagstaff and not having transit necessarily incorporated. So there, but there's clearly a challenge with getting that right on the city end, right, with development. I mean, that's what this is, that's where this is headed, right? Yeah.
So put in the bus pull out when you design. Is that what?
I think it's more, I mean, I think what I heard Phil say, and that makes sense, is it's more like if it's going to be served by transit, or we know it will be in the future, providing that bus pull out or the bus stop. I guess I would see like encouraging transit could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but like to me, providing a clear walkway through whatever like say we're talking about a new subdivision, providing walkways to that would be encouraging the ridership because you are trying to promote that ease of using that transportation. But like that's one person interpreting that. And so I just want to make sure that if that's what we are trying to achieve, That we make it, like, that's more clear in what they, intent.
You guys figure that out? Fine. Is everyone all right moving on to streetscapes and parking?
Very newish section. So. Other than great streets and gateways, everything else is kind of on the newer side in terms of things that. So it kind of incorporates things we started doing during COVID because it's really empty, there's a lot of demand for outdoor space. It was changing some of the way we did business. And so that's why this whole section really applies to the city. County does not have the kind of infrastructure that supports this kind of curb management, which is what the ITE calls it.
Technology Department.
International Institute of Transportation Engineers, I think.
Anyone got, does anyone have, can we do this whole section, do we think, guys, at the same time? So does anyone have any comments on the entire streetscapes and parking section? Yeah, Garth, and then Michelle.
So this is going along the lines of what we're gonna try to do behind MOD is activate an alley for pedestrian activity. What does that mean though? Like, do you have like 15 feet for emergency vehicle? Where would I find something like that to be able to look at it and say, okay, I've got 18 feet for emergency vehicles to run down that alley so I can hold my fence? Is there something that?
There are examples of really the only alleys we've tried to activate in town are downtown, Aspen Alley and the one between LaRue and San Francisco Street. And then like, so it's, if you would like us, we could provide some photographic examples, I think, here, if that would be helpful. Okay.
Quick and easy one. Can you define placemaking? That's in the last implementation guideline under SP1.
I think I defined it in a previous chapter, didn't I?
Talked about it.
Yeah, I think the very first chapter we talked about placemaking. Placemaking,
Don't you want to have a definition for it?
well, the definitions will be all at the end for everything. So, but
Somewhere.
placemaking as a theory is just that, you design you design the space between buildings to create a sense of place and to like make everything human scale essentially. So you don't put highway streetlights on a pedestrian street. That's like an easy way to explain. Like the lights on the interstate are huge, right? We wouldn't put that on a street in the south side. So it's just a placemaking example. But it can be a lot of things. It can be public art. It can be.
Got anything else?
Whatever, to SB2 as well.
Yeah, we're gonna do the whole section. Yeah, go for it.
So I have a question about why, there used to be language in here that talked about eliminating parking minimums. Developments, and that's not there anymore.
Right, there were some commenters who put in language, not my staff, that said eliminate parking minimums. That is what like national trends will tell you is a good planning principle. It's not very specific to Flagstaff and our situation.
No,
I mean, I don't think we would eliminate parking minimums everywhere within the city limits.
so how you weigh eliminating them in certain areas.
Written, so
Yes.
it was put in there and then planning staff looked at this. And so the way it was written, it used a land designation that we don't use when we talk about parking. So that was replaced with this strategy should be explored to reduce the need for parking to decrease housing costs and promote active transportation. So that is what that was replaced with.
I just thought eliminate parking minimums was stronger.
You know, but it might not be the right answer, and that's actually not the right answer for all neighborhoods and communities. And so we really just need to look at it more holistically.
So remember, one of our critical success factors is it's implementable and feasible. Fully eliminating parking minimums citywide in Flagstaff probably doesn't.
I didn't think fully, this meant in some places.
I think other people read it and absolutely thought it was fully. So it was like powerful, but it created disparate ideas of what it meant.
You say eliminate where possible. As appropriate.
You guys got it covered in that.
I think the language that is written kind of speaks to it, reducing the need, because it's addressing the fact that there's, like, we're talking about this connectivity, and we're just talking, had a big conversation about how people can't use the sidewalks in the winter time. So how do we eliminate parking when we have a lot of other issues that we have to handle so that people have a choice other than using their car? And so I think that's why we went with this language, is so that it was more holistic, that we need to, as a system, reduce the need of reliability so that we are getting to the reduction of parking or eliminating the need for it. And we might have to be strategic about what uses we do that for at the beginning, or where we do it. But I appreciate the desire to have that more powerful language. I think this is a more realistic way, and it also addresses the fact that it's not about a code change. There are systematic changes we need to make this possible in our community.
Anyone else got any other comments?
Would you be open to making accessibility a policy? Pulling it out of an implementation guideline into a policy?
The accessible parking one? Or accessibility in general?
Accessible parking is kind of where it started, but accessibility in general.
But generally accessibility or accessibility specifically?
ADA.
ADA, okay.
accessibility, yeah.
I think
And
there's,
prioritizing that kind of in the downtown area. You know, as we're looking at some of these other things, energizing our downtown area, it's just really hard for some folks to get around. And I'd love to see big movement on that.
Would contribute to our equity, idea of expanding equity throughout the entire.
the reason I ask is so TS1, which is elevate the safety and accommodation, which I think we meant as ADA accommodation of vulnerable road users to the primary circulation street and transportation system planning was where we had intended to capture that. That's why I asked if it was only, if you just meant accessible. So I guess I want to understand, do you just want to see the word accessible be part of TS1?
Parking, no.
She's talking about more than parking, because I asked and then
She has a name. It's Julie.
Julie has a name. So Julie asked about more than parking.
So we were talking about I was under gateways and great streets.
Yeah,
And that's
okay.
what I was focused on as far as gateways and great streets.
Okay, now I'm following where your ideas are originating. So you'd like to see something under gateways and great streets specific to ADA accessibility as part of overall streetscape design.
That it's a high priority and it comes before.
Thank you. I was just trying, my head was indexing more things, I think, than
I
you.
was trying to keep up.
You did great. I got it.
One last question. Third from the last on this one, SP2 says accessible parking should be centrally located in activity centers. And the only concern I had with that is, what if that's not possible? What if it's a downtown activity center and we have all the streets and parking would be just outside the activity center?
That is a demand of our, that was a clear demand of the downtown parking district, which is why all the accessible parking is right there.
Yeah, it works really.
San Francisco. So we've actually already achieved it in the downtown.
We already have it.
We already have it. There's a whole little spot. If you don't have a placard, you may not know where it is. Where
I do, because if you guys remember.
Yes,
when I
you
first
had
came
booted.
back And I had it.
I don't know about
It's great.
Yes, we've already done it in the downtown. And it is a regular request of our, what are they called? The Commission for Inclusive and Adaptive Living.
Okay.
So this is,
Accessible parking, it's a specific kind of parking. It's not accessible to everyone.
yes, they mean accessible parking means you need a placard to park there.
I didn't know that.
So should we underline that and then do your little underline it?
Yeah.
Could you underline that? I read it completely differently.
We meant big A accessible, not little a accessible.
It's the beginning of the sentence, so
So that did get.
can I make a suggestion for an addition to the implementation guidelines in B3? Is that we currently have no policy right within this city to basically make this red to provide access trucks, and that becomes, I discovered on a project, problematic when we're trying to put access for ladder trucks onto taller buildings. You know what I'm saying?
Do.
So like we had a situation where it's like, if we could have removed 2 parking spaces, we could have had the staging zone for the ladder truck to meet fire code. We lost 2 parking spaces, but it wasn't that. So just, does that count as a curb management policy? Something else.
I'm trying to think, because I mean, in some ways it is curb management, but then also like in the incentive, like how we manage parking.
It's about parking, right? Because it's basically saying having this fire lane is more so that this building could now be 5 stories, because otherwise it could only be 3, is more important than.
So here,
I think it is, I do think it does fall under, I mean, it's weird to me, but I think it does fall under.
I just wrote something about. Say that again. Something about trading parking for public safety needs to allow for. What you mean?
Yeah, but specifically to because there's fire access requirements for stuff that's over 3 stories, right? Or 34 feet or whatever the code is, right? So if we want a lot of buildings that are denser or bigger than that, we need to provide for that access.
This seems very, very specific too, though. Can we work that one offline?
Yeah, I just put a
It
note.
was a thought.
Right.
'Cause I've had a specific problem with it. Okay, is everyone okay to move on to airport, rail and freight?
Wait, Brian's up. Airport rail and freight.
Anyone? Anyone have any general? Any comments across the whole thing?
General, is there gonna be any discussion about greenhouse gases? And the, or lead pollution? Gas has that in it.
Brian, can you talk for just a second about the air sustainability plan?
Yeah, hi everyone, Brian Gall, Airport Director. Sort of like Julie mentioned very early on in the conversation, the airport does have a lot of other plans that are in addition to our role within this planning process. So we do have an airport master plan, as well as an airport sustainability master plan, as well as an airport noise exposure plan. So all those are available publicly on our website, and they've actually all been, I think almost all of those have been developed since the last regional planning process. So the sustainability master plan includes a number of sections. I'd have to pull it up to look at them specifically, but it does address things, especially in terms of electrification, things in terms of emissions. One thing it doesn't mention, I heard somebody mention lead emissions. That's one of those challenging situations where we're generally preempted federally from making a lot of changes, but it is something that we're actively tracking. But we do have some that addressed within that sustainability master plan.
We want to reference it in our own plan or?
Sure, we can add a reference to the sustainability plan.
Anyone else got any, Michelle?
Yeah, there's some strange repeated wording between the implementation guidelines and policy A1 and A2. Is that?
Multimodal access one.
Yeah.
So I was just
I
about to
really
say.
like the bicycle infrastructure and storage part that's in A2. That was my suggestion to add to the one in A1. So why are those different, and could we?
I think somebody just wrote them twice in different ways. I would delete one of them, like the first one. We don't need to say anything twice.
Right, and I think the one that's the first under A2, well, it seems like it fits better under A1 to me than plan and manage development in the vicinity of the airport. That's A2, policy A2 doesn't seem to be the right place to put that. To be in under A1, but if you could add in bicycle infrastructure and storage,
Yeah, into the.
it's really important to have at the airport.
Brian, the airport director, Brian has his hand up.
Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, great comment on that. I'm not sure what happened there. This has been tweaked a little bit since I think some of us made our initial comments on it. I will say, Sarah, I like the change that you made with the two policies that fit under the goal with the implementation guidelines as supplement instead of having quite as many policies as we did last time. Similar to Michelle's comment, I actually thought, and I wanted to bring this to the team. I'm not sure that the implementation guidelines listed under policy A2, I'm not sure that any of them actually fit with policy A2. The intent of policy A2 specifically was, so I guess a little bit of background. The city is in the airport has accepted a significant amount of federal funding in the form of federal grants from the Federal Aviation Administration for capital improvements projects at the airport. As part of that, we sign on to sponsor assurances, with the city of Flagstaff being the sponsor, since we're both the owner and the operator of the airport. And some of those include things like managing to the best of our ability the development of the properties around the airport to make sure that there aren't incompatible development of that property that would affect the future use of the airport. So that's really what was the intent of that policy A2. I think there are, if this committee wants to move forward with some of the other implementation guidelines there, I think there's we can have discussion about that, but I think that might need to be in a separate policy versus the one that is currently under.
Yeah, and actually, I think reading it in this context, we might suggest, if the committee's okay, moving this whole policy to the growth and land use chapter. Because it's really about land use in the vicinity of the airport, not transportation of the airport.
Yeah. Okay. Is everyone good with that? Tom, you want to?
On goal A, I think we should add, it lists the different kinds of aircraft or air services. We should add specifically firefighting aircraft in there. They have particular unique support requirements that I think the airport should expand on and be more capable.
Add it to the end, public safety and firefighting aircraft operations, though generally people in public safety consider firefighting part.
Right, the reason I put it in there is that they have specific support requirements that are not general public safety requirements. So I think it should be mentioned specifically by name.
All right, guys, I think we can call it. Okay,
Brian.
go ahead, Brian.
He's there for it.
Yeah, thanks everyone. If we had time, I wanted to make two other minor recommendations, similar to the recommendation to adding firefighting aircraft operations. I would recommend adding general aviation to that list. General aviation being the FAA's term that basically catches all other types of aircraft operations. So that includes everything. That's actually where firefighting is considered under in the FAA's eyes. I don't know that I would remove firefighting. I still like that being added there. But that would include things like flight training, for example, or any of the smaller private aircraft we see, as well as commercial aircraft that are operating outside of, say, public safety or air passenger. So everything from companies that might be doing surveying or aerial mapping would be under that general aviation. So I'd like to include that if the team's okay with that. And then similarly, under policy A1, I would recommend adding reliable to that list of what we're trying to provide in the airport. I think that maybe along with safe, efficient, resilient, and sustainable covers the need to maintain the existing infrastructure and facilities that we have here. So those are the two smaller recommendations I had if the team's okay with that. Thank you.
All righty, guys, are we gonna be able to call it? That was the end. Anyone else got any other comments before we
Were there any great comments?
comments?
I think your work's in free. Made you happy, made you feel seen.
It makes sense.
Okay.
I didn't think it, I thought it.
Righty, congratulations, everyone. We actually did it.
Hey, you saved me 15 minutes. For this one, I would actually passed out while we're talking about the parking lot, a draft agenda for next week. Don't have anyone online. It's in the, no, in the, that's this week's agenda. So next week, we, is our meeting to do the parking lot cleanup on 18th. Parking lot's pretty big. So I tried to put it together as an agenda. We also ran into the snag of that sustainability and water services have competing items on the council agenda. So the energy related items we need to postpone because sustainability, the relevant people, subject matter knowledge can't be here. We'll probably postpone that to July 10th. And water services will bump all those topics to the very end in like the fingers crossed kind of way that water services gets here in time. But I wanted to put the draft agenda in front of you, see if there was anything, I know you were sent the parking lot ahead of time. In the ongoing parking lot that not covering, that you think to be done on the 18th. And then just check in that it's okay to do a postponement of the items for which I can't get staff here.
Also say selfishly as the person who makes sure the meeting runs on time, if you have anything that you want to take off of the list, please also do that. So for instance, right, if there was an item that we put in at some point earlier on in the process and you now feel that it was, need to discuss it any further.
Eric, can I just, point of clarification, when are the sustainability is gonna be talked about?
The only meeting we have left is July 10th. Unless you would like to schedule it. And say anyway, jump up and say, let's schedule an additional meeting. No takers, really?
I'm not against it. I think having a lot of less conversations regardless of the time is more important than having enough meeting.
I'm not gonna be here on July 10th, so.
That's the date we have for growth and land use because we switched it because we weren't ready yet for the state. So, thoughts on, do we just need to schedule an additional meeting to have other topics and maybe if we could do one close to the 10th, we could try and start the growth and land use chapter early as part of that meeting, or do you want, for the items we're not getting to, let me read off the ones that aren't on the agenda that aren't resolved yet right now. So one is developing metrics on jobs and water use for water resources that might not be available the 10th. And we haven't sent you out a packet for next week yet because I'm trying to gather all the, this is a very cat herding oriented meeting. We have a lot of cats in the parking lot. And so we're just trying to make sure we've got them. There's not, city county flood control content's not ready. The policy on the urban growth boundary is not ready. The food systems thing.
That one up.
Okay, but we have the webinar on the 17th.
Set an example.
But we do have a webinar scheduled for Monday for people who want to talk about food systems, not in this like policy setting way, but just learn about it. The call out box on energy transition land for biomass storage and the carbon removal and biosequestration. I just don't have staff available for those topics for this date. So
Ones are the ways that we can address those individually with the people it's about, as opposed to having to do it.
I could schedule a topic specific meeting on the sustainability ones and then just see who's available if you want to approach it that way. And then we could have a shorter conversation on the 10th.
I don't think about that. So if you had something that was like yours, right, like that's in a box next to it. Or fault that it's there.
So the land for biomass storage, if we're talking about land use on the 10th, are you gonna be talking about designations for industrial uses? Cause that's it kind of that was, yes, I brought that up as a specific, but we have as a need, industrial land for business expansion.
If that's where you'd want us to cover it, we could take it off the parking lot and just Jenny and I could address it in the review.
That'd be very good. That's what it was.
Good examples.
Someone remind me of the urban growth boundary. What was that about?
I haven't seen anything about the urban growth boundary because it's been very hard to vet what we need to do with those policies internally, and we still haven't resolved it.
It's gone and it's gone.
It's very interdisciplinary and it's tied all up in the land use chapter and the water chapter and a lot of nuances. I've not been able to get internal agreement on even what to propose to you. That's the issue.
Hopefully we get it before we.
We'll own it.
Before the citizens vote
Yeah, I mean,
You're just gonna have to live with the language we provide and everybody else is just gonna have to smile and say, great.
it's either status quo or something radically different, right? Like that's and there's not that we're proposing things that are terribly radically different, but we've had this policy in place with few changes for over 20 years and people are taking a hard look at it. And deciding like, does it do what it needs? To look at it differently. Laws, the other options. That's pretty complicated when it comes to water land use connections. We're working on it. So we're taking off food systems. We are gonna incorporate land for biomass storage into the growth and land use chapter. Anything else? And I guess the last question was, do we want to deal with the energy items in a separate meeting? And is it a subgroup of this that wants to meet on it first, or does everybody?
How many of those are there?
Two. The call out box on the energy transition that Tom proposed and the carbon removal and fire sequestration for stewardship. You're not scrolled down enough. You're missing one. Oh.
The carbon removable one about that one sentence that was in the plan?
Can't tell you right now off the top of my head. I have to.
Just one sentence.
I thought it was that people wanted there to be more information about it. Or stewardship and resilience. It was that it was not clear enough and it seemed like a big deal in the carbon neutrality plan and wasn't explained enough what the opportunities were in resource stewardship and resilience. So I think it was a example of something we did in the first chapter of review, and by the 5th chapter, we want to go back and look at
it. We've got, I see two there, right? So one's Tom's and one Diane's. Are you guys willing to have those conversations offline with Sarah? Make sure that your concerns are addressed. And then we can avoid having to do another meeting.
So once again, it's a land use issue. The carbon removal and is all about actually.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe Diane and I can work on.
If you're talking about carbon removal, I would want to
It's
in on that.
It's the scheme where you sequester carbon underground.
To talk.
Maybe Walter, Diane, and Michelle can get us on those three.
Sure.
Walter was the other person who wanted to be in on that.
Me? First, everything, the miscellaneous June form, we do have time for public participation. We do have a couple of minutes. Say something, please go ahead. Go to bed. Save it. Appreciate that. Would you like to go ahead, please do.
Important. I do have a comment in the interest of speaking my mind. I do think the discussion ended up in a great spot. No complaints there, but if I do this, I'll think about it the whole rest of the night, so I won't be able to go to sleep. I do think we're being a little too cautious about parking. I mean, there's this talk about it being a national trend, but it's really being driven by individual cities because they're looking at parking minimums and realizing that they don't make sense. Just in the past month, there's been 5 cities ranging in size from 11,000 to 200,000 population that have eliminated parking minimums. And that's in addition to Colorado, which just at the state level got rid of parking minimums for multifamily and adaptive reuse for pretty broad swaths of the state. But I do respect that we may not want to like really detailed into policy prescription, so we may want to leave it out just because of that. And it can be somewhat controversial. But in lieu of that, I do think it would have been good to have like a reiteration of some first principles that come out of the academic, that are like really common across the academic literature. Like basic stuff like the price of public parking should be set to maximize accessibility to residents and visitors, or parking management districts should be considered in neighborhoods with a limited supply of public street parking relative to demand. But that's just speaking my piece. I do think the conversation ended up in a good place. And yeah, I really enjoyed listening into it.
Guys, are we done? Can we go? Go home.
I don't have anything.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
I don't know why you would want to be.